Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi barakatuh. This is Robert from Islam for Europeans on our second roundtable. And I'm very pleased to welcome back two of our guests and invite and also a new one to Islam for Europeans. We have Yusuf Scott, who's coming to us from Washington. Assalamu alaikum, Yusuf.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for
Okay.
having me.
No problem. And we're also bringing back brother William Halim Brianis from Baltimore, Maryland, home of my rival Baltimore Ravens. How's it going, William?
Wa alaikum salam. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, pretty good. And yes, we have one of the brother who helped me help the whole project get its start. We have Sim from the Madman Lukes. How are you doing, Sim?
Thank you so much for having me, man. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to Islam for Europeans. It's a beautiful effort that Robert's initiated, and it seems like he's doing it consistently and it's taking off. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Hopefully, inshallah, they'll get bigger and better as well as you guys. I see your subscriber count going up. And you guys got your big shot on NPR. Hopefully, that'll get you all the notices. The best all male Muslim podcast.
Yeah, I made that the byline on our Twitter, all male Muslim podcast by NPR. You know how they have like other places have reviews by notable places? So I just made our Twitter byline, all male podcast, NPR. You got to milk it for everything, man. you got to take it. You just got to milk it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But no, it's generating, more interest. And you guys have female sisters on the Mad Men Luke's whenever you can. So we definitely want more. And then trying to get a sister on here on I4E as well, but it'll take time.
Yeah, the whole thing is not about whether sisters or not, and it's about, are you bringing something to discussion, And I don't even think along that lines. Like I try to think about like, hey, who can I bring the best ideas out? It doesn't necessarily have to be a sister or a brother who's white or black or, whatever intersection. It's about having the best discussion you can with the resources you have available to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, mashallah, I agree, man. Alhamdulillah, hopefully we keep this going. So I'll get right into the first topic. We want to discuss two things today going on, and I guess social media, the social media world. Since we're living in the age of COVID, we're kind of in this this universe is just taken off, and it's now become, I guess, everyone's reality now. And the way Muslim social media and the greater social media reacts to these things. The first topic will be an episode on the BBC where we had Emma Barnett interview a sister from the Muslim Council of Britain on her question of quote unquote female imams, and the reaction to that from the greater Twitter world and also Muslim Twitter as well. So I'm just going to show that right now. So I would go on share screen, and then we share this one, and then we'll play it, and we'll share that. I'm not very tech savvy, but okay, here we go.
In the UK at the moment, just because I presume we'll get to this more, but representing, of course, women, which you will do as part of this. How many do we have in Britain?
I think, again, I wouldn't have a clue on these numbers because my role is making sure that we include our affiliates, particularly women, in the work that we are doing and making sure that our structures, as well as the work we do, are truly representative. So I think that
sorry. You don't know, that's fine if you don't know, but do we have female imams in this country?
Again, it's not, are you referring to chaplains or are you referring to women that lead prayer? Where are you referring to? And I think,
well, you tell me. I'm genuinely intrigued to know. Of course, female priests have been around for some time. We've also seen the advent of female rabbis in this country. What is the picture for women leading prayer in Britain in Muslim communities?
Well, I think my role isn't really to adjudicate or to examine that part of spirituality. I think where women want to make those choices, where, that these are all religious discussions.
Oh, no, of course. It was just, I thought, because the Muslim Council of Britain has played such an important role in getting the number of Muslims, for instance, added to the census. I mean, that was done at the turn of the century, so we actually knew how many Muslims there were. Do we have female imams?
I think what's really important with Muslim Council Britain and the work that we do is actually that it's not about defining, or going into these types of questions regarding spirituality, but actually looking at how we can benefit our communities, especially given the pandemic and given the role that everybody needs to be playing.
And we will get to the pandemic. It's just quite striking that you can't sort of answer that question. I recognise it's not a religious or spiritual role.
I don't feel like that's within the parameters of my roles and responsibilities, especially as the first elected female representative.
I would have asked a man, but I'm asking you because you're here.
Okay, so I guess my first question to the panel is, how do you think Sister Zara did? Sim, what are your thoughts, general thoughts?
So she's a politician. First, we have to give her a break. Like, we can't, no matter what we think of how she handled the question, I know, like, it's Monday morning quarterbacking, when you're throwing a question like that. And but second of all, politicians are trying to get Muslims to be accepted or not seen as weirdos in Western society. So the correct answer is obviously zero, and you just have to say it very proudly, and you have to say it with confidence, and you have to really tell them, like, hey, look, our relationship, our gender roles are much more different in Islam than than the Western context, and in what Western philosophy sees how women are to be in religious spaces, at least, in leadership within religious spaces. We have rules that we abide by, and I think if she kind of just stuck to that, like, hey, look, we stick to our rules. This is what our faith teaches us. It's not nothing against, men or women or any kind of different category. It's just about how our faith has delegated assignments for each gender.
Mm-hmm. William, what are your thoughts on that? Would you agree? Should the answer have been zero? I mean, it's difficult when you're on the hot seat like that. I mean,
I think that the first thing to agree with is that, anything that we say is just Monday morning quarterbacking. I mean, honestly, we weren't there. We wasn't going through it. We didn't feel that pressure that she had on her. Honestly, to say zero would have been the correct answer, but I think she was very diplomatic, and she was trying to bring to the fore that being the imam and leading prayers is not the only form of leadership, and it's not the only form of representation. I think she did very good going back to that point repeatedly and trying to show that being an imam is not the be all end all, that there's other forms of leadership. And I think that she came across very well with that. But, again, the obvious answer is zero. But being diplomatic the way she was, I think she handled it very well, given the situation.
Yeah. Yusuf?
Yeah, I mean, I would just have to reiterate the same points that have already been said, right? I mean, I feel like there was a missed opportunity, though, right? There was that opportunity for, there's that's a loaded question that usually men get. And then when men get that question and then answer with zero, then we're forced into this role of, well, why is Islam sexist? Why is it this and that, right? And for a woman in a position that she's in, especially a leadership position, for her to have been able to have said zero and then been firm in that would have been much more, I would say, telling to the audience to be able to say, look, here's a woman who's in leadership who says zero, and she's proud of the fact that there's zero, that's her religion, and she stands by that, right? And so it would have given a lot more credence to authority and, some respect to what's actually going on, instead of, oh, well, she's just kind of hiding behind this political answer, right? And yeah, I mean, it's Monday morning quarterbacking, but at the same time, when we don't get those opportunities very often. And so when one of those is missed, it's honestly a bit of a shame.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything that you guys said. It's I kind of froze even when I debated Brother Umar Ali on Luke's, and so to be in front of the entire world is I think she did well with what she had to work with. But yeah, I mean, when Westerners think of the monotheistic religions, especially Judaism and I guess Catholicism in particular, and in terms of Christianity, they think of when they think of the term rabbi, the rabbi has so many roles that he plays. He leads the prayer, he leads the sermon. The rabbi is also a leader for the community. And it's like a very it's like I guess like an absolutist status, as opposed, there's no other leadership roles that have that sort of naming status, I guess, in the Western mind. So when Westerners think of an imam, they think of that's the be all and end all, that he is the leader of the community, he leads the prayer, he does the sermons, he provides guidance for the community, and there's no other roles. But of course in Islam we have muftis, we have sheikhs, we have muhaddith, we have imams. So it's yes, of course there are alimat. I mean, there are female Muslim scholars, even from the seventh century CE. I mean, at the early times of Islam, hundreds of them. But again, it's so difficult to answer that question in such a small amount of time. I mean, when you're trying to go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Just before you move on to the next point, and hold your thought, because one of the things I want to contend with her uh, allegedly saying that there are other rabbis and priests or other leaderships positions in other faiths that have opened up, those are like outliers. Like, they're so few and far between, and even in those faiths, that like I've never even seen. I engage with a lot of the Christian community in my at my mosque and stuff. I've never seen a female priest. I don't know what she's referring to.
I would interject here and say,
Yeah.
actually, it's rather common, and we have a large Jewish community here in Baltimore, and there's female rabbis here as
Okay.
well. So I mean, it does happen, but usually not in orthodoxy, right?
Yeah.
Not in orthodoxy. And one of the important things is that answering the question are there any female imams? It begs the question, what is the imam? And so saying yes or no demands qualifiers. And so it's not actually an easy conversation to have in and of itself, because as Robert, you were pointing out, what is the role of an imam? What is an imam? What is an imam in contrast to, And so these are, answering the question, perhaps I'd say perhaps the best way to answer the question is with a question. What do you mean when you say imam?
Yeah.
And because most of these people, they know the title, but they have no clue the meaning of that title. And so they're asking loaded questions without knowing what it means to begin with. So.
And I think a lot of these interviewers are also receiving help from anti-Islam bigots who want to discredit or hurt Islam in any way, because that majority of these interviewers and commentators, I'm not talking about the specialists, who actually focus on Islam and try to counter Islam, but yeah, I just think that there's stuff happening in the background that we're not aware of.
I think when she asked what's a female imam, I think we all know what she's really asking. She's asking if there's a woman who stands in front of the entire congregation, men and women, and leads the prayer, right? That's what she's getting at. In the Anglican Church, which is the predominant Christian denomination within England, it's the state religion, right? They've had, like she said, female priests for a while. That's something that they accept, but it isn't something that's in Catholicism, which is when most people think about female priests or priests in general.
Right.
People think about Catholics where there aren't female priests, right? And like you said, William, there's, most of the time in Orthodox Judaism, there's no such thing as a female rabbi. That's only when you get into Reform Judaism and some of these different things that the orthodoxy sees as not being full-fledged or not fully practicing, right? And even, I'm in some groups that with Jewish dialogue and different things, and they talk about how Reform Judaism is really lax, and the different groups outside of Orthodoxy are considered to be lax, and how they try to release some of those roles so that they could assimilate into the culture that's around them, and not necessarily as a full-fledged, like, different understanding of the scriptures. So I think we really we know what she's asking, right? We can't, and so trying to play semantics and what, well, what do you mean by an imam? I don't think that's beneficial, because we know, what that loaded question really holds. And
Well,
so,
she came right out and asked, are there women? She came, if I remember correctly, she came right out and asked, are there women leading the prayers? Right? She actually
right.
came right out and asked that question in the interview. And the reality is that, again, and this is the problem, is that we have a different paradigm, and we have to understand that our rules and regulations, there are conditions, there are shurut, there are these things when we talk about our rights, and all of these questions, again, they beg questions. So rather than getting, and again, this is why I think she handled herself very well, is because one of the things dealing with media is you want to keep everything down to a soundbite, not, down to a certain amount of seconds, to where if they clip you, then they don't have anything to get you on. And, answering some of these questions, again, when she talked about, are there women leading people in prayer like this, then again, the answer went back to spirituality and representation. And I just think that that's a good answer, as opposed to trying to delve into a larger conversation that they don't want to have, because they're in control. They're in control of the medium. They're in control of the discussion. And so it's very easy. You give an answer, and then they just steamroll you, and that's their role, that's their job, and they're trained professionals to do that. And so we have to keep that in mind.
I think in Western societies, especially in North America, when they see the women praying behind the men, I think the immediate image that it conjures up in their head is, a city bus from the 1950s in Alabama, where Black people are at the back of the bus and the white people are in the front. So it just immediately creates a negative connotation in their minds. I was talking to one sister years ago. She was a convert, and her family were, against her conversion originally. She actually succeeded in bringing her mom to the mosque, and she witnessed the prayer and everything. And after they left, her mom was like, "No, okay, now I understand why the women, pray behind the men." I mean, it's pretty obvious to see the way that the Muslims pray. It would, men would not be able to concentrate at all, and it would, be dishonorable to the women as well. So, but like you said, like the goal of these large media outlets is to catch you in something that's, you can place in a soundbite, that will make, Islam look even worse, as if it doesn't look bad enough already in the Western media. So, I guess it's the unfortunate reality that we're kind of faced with. So, but I'll see this in another direction. I didn't realize that that in the form of madhabs, that there's actually ikhtilaf on this issue of women leading a prayer of all women. I thought that it was a consensus, but it turns out I was wrong. I read that in the Shafi madhab, a woman can lead the other women in prayer. They all stand in the same row, but that's not the case for the Maliki or the Hanafi madhab. William, do you want to talk about that a little bit, or?
No, alhamdulillah, what I learned from my teachers in the Maliki school is that a woman can lead women. For example, my wife could lead my daughters. In a home like this is something that's permitted. The Hanafi madhab, what I learned, and I'm not a Hanafi, I study Maliki fiqh myself, but what I understand from the Hanafi madhab is women aren't allowed to pray in Jama'at if they're not praying in the Jama'at behind a male imam. And so if women are in a home together, then they have to pray independently, each one leading themselves obviously in salah. But again, being a Maliki, my belief is that the strongest position is the Shafi'i position, because we have a hadith to back it up, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave women permission to lead other women in prayer, and we have our mother Aisha radiallahu anha leading women in prayer. And so, because we have examples of this, we have a precedent for it. Then to come later and say no, this can't be done, is something that, it's the weaker
Right.
position. Wallahu a'lam. This is what I
From
learned, and Allah knows best.
Yeah, from a Hanafi position, those are considered exceptional circumstances and that they were for teaching purposes, right? And so, you can see, so the Hanafis kind of interpret things differently. For example, the hadith where the man was told to stand up and pray during the 2 rakats during Jumu'ah, right? So the Hanafis don't take that as something that's generally permissible, but there is a specific circumstance in which he was commanded to do that. And so the same situation is when there is a specific teaching moment, and so they were allowed to teach the women how to pray in that manner. But generally, there's the hadith that the best prayer for a woman is alone in her home, right? And so that's a direct command, as opposed to some exceptional circumstances in which the women are permitted to do that for the purpose of teaching.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's difficult to summarize in a 2-minute BBC clip.
Yeah. No.
I think my wife wanted to also talk about this in the conversation. That way, but yeah, she's going to. I think she's going to get an extra chair for her. But yeah, that's the thing. I think for us, who have like non-Muslim families, these are conversations that go on in every every dinner table. That we're just basically thrust into these conversations all the time. I think for a lot of Muslims that I saw in social media, like they were just just flat out zero, don't give any nuance, because I guess there's a fear that if we address some of these issues that are important in the Muslim community, like having adequate spaces for our sisters to pray, there's kind of this suspicion and this fear that it has to do with there's some sort of postmodernist agenda to it. Is that something that you guys have seen, or?
No, but what I would say, if I may, is that one of the issues for Islam for Europeans is to look at cultural paradigms, and the cultural paradigm for most of us is that women are in the center of worship, meaning the places of worship, and not just in a devotional sense, but oftentimes you'll find the women being caretakers. You'll find them, doing different things in that center. And to have a masjid that honors that is important. From a cultural perspective. To go into a place where there are no women, there is no place for women. This is something foreign to us, and that's just the reality of it. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave adequate space to women. Women had third spaces in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Aisha's house radiallahu anha is an example of that. Even though it was connected to the masjid, we have people who would go and sit with her and take knowledge from her nephews, and other than that. And so we have examples of women being given space, not just in the masjid, but being given their own space, their own representation in the prophetic community. And I think that to look at this from a cultural perspective, and I don't want to judge anybody else's culture, but a lot of the things that we see is cultural from other people's culture, not Islamic, but cultural in its paradigm. And I think that we have to start looking at things through our own lenses, our own communities. And when we establish communities, when we establish masajid, or when we are a part of a masjid in our community, then we also have to bring to the fore our own cultural paradigms, our own understandings, our own experiences, our own understandings. to have a place, and I'll switch this from women to children, to have a place where children are told constantly to be quiet, to sit still, no, you can't play, you can't do this. This isn't what we're used to. We're used to having a place where children can come, learn their little lessons, play, hang out, all of these things. And this isn't to take away the sanctity of the masjid, right? But giving them their own space is important. And so that's true for women, that's true for children, just as it is for men. And my masjid, where I'm most frequently at, where I teach in these things, this particular masjid, it used to be called the men's club, because it was only men, women just didn't come, and we afforded them space, but they still felt uncomfortable coming. But the point being here is that most masajid get this image of being where guys go to hang out, the women aren't permitted. We have to change that paradigm, culturally speaking, because this is our culture. It's from our culture to have these spaces, these, even if we say third spaces, annex to the masjid for sisters. They need a place to be as well, inshallah.
Yeah. Sim, did you want to comment on that? What kind of, I guess, is there like, I don't know, is it that, do you find that, I guess the women, that are around, like, mosques in Chicago, like, is it changing around, or is it just this kind of struggle that, like, there's this fear that, there's some type of agenda behind,
I think it's much more simpler than that. It's a matter of resources. The Muslim community is hamstrung by the number of practitioners to their mosques and schools and every institution that we try to set up. Everything's restricted to that, and the idea that there's an organized agenda to keep the sisters out is ridiculous. It's just something that is a bullet point that feminists and people who want to transpose whatever their views are onto Islam, they want to use that as a highlight, like, hey, look at this mosque, it doesn't have enough adequate space for sisters. When you look at the reality, though, even if you look at the mosques that have the capabilities for sisters to be accommodated, for most of the prayers, the 5 daily prayers, there's not a sister to be found.
yeah.
And then when a mosque or someone who's trying to establish a mosque, they have to kind of organize in their mind, hey, what are my priorities here? Do I have enough space that I can allocate to the regular congregation? And I think that's it.
Yeah. No, I just, one last comment before I bring my my wife on. She has the stories. I guess in Canada it's a little bit different, but she's going to talk about her experiences with mosques in Canada and the United States. Yeah. But just one last comment. I think I'd say for female converts, a lot of the times it's a mosque is, when they first convert, their only real place of solace, really. And usually but the thing is, like you said, those spaces will usually be empty, or maybe there's one or two sisters there, and there's just not the resources are just not available. So it's kind of a different paradigm, really. I think, like you said, like some women just don't really feel comfortable going to a mosque in the first place, but it's more, I guess it's more of a supply and demand issue, really. I mean, but let me, I do want to bring my wife on. She's just going to come on for a few minutes and just talk about her experiences with, mosques in Canada, because I think it's kind of a different paradigm. But I just want to let her know what she has to say, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you're gonna put on pause. I'll be right back. Okay, so pause recording. Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to welcome my wife, Sarah, and she's going to give her own, give her experiences about what she's experienced at mosques, I guess, around North America or in Canada as well. So take it away.
I had mixture, like different experiences with the mosques. Some are good, some are really horrible, and some are okay. Um, there's some masjids. They have the entrance right next to where the garbage is for women. Entrance for women where the garbage is, and it's in the back in a dark alley, which is not safe at all. Like especially in the neighborhood that where the mosque was. And they were like, "Oh, it's for the safety of women." I was like, "That's quite the opposite." And then there's other experiences where like there was like an event happening, and the brothers were all in the main hall, which where they pray, which is fine. But the women were in a unfinished basement, and all they could see is a small screen on top, on the and I thought that was ridiculous. And I remember this Pakistani auntie. She was like, "Why are you treating us like that?" And other women were like, "It's okay, it's okay." No, it's not. She's right. And of course, I will always praise ISNA. Oh my goodness, ISNA. They are perfect. They have a barrier where women are in the back, but the barrier is not high enough where you don't see anything going on. And then on the side, they have this room specifically for mothers who have children. Like if they want to breastfeed, they want to, and the children want to play around. That is perfect. I mean, I in my opinion, that was like the most welcoming and more pleasant experience being in a masjid. And I really wish that all masjids were like that. And that's pretty much my experience, except one masjid, because we didn't know there was an entrance to the woman. There's a woman entrance all the way in the back. Me and my friend of mine went in the front, and we were checking out. It's the first time we ever went to that masjid. And we got kicked out. And the imam, or I don't know who this brother was, he's like, "Astaghfirullah, woman." I'm like, "Oh, there's an entrance in the back." I'm like, and he was mad, and there's a huge frown on his face. I'm like, "Gee, thank you for being welcoming." I mean, yeah, I was the hijabi one, but my friend wasn't. She's a Muslim, but she wasn't. I mean, that's not a way to greet like your Muslim family, right? Oh, sorry about that. My mischievous cat just dropped some stuff.
Yeah, I've seen and again, a few bad apples spoil the bunch. I mean, like when I was in Windsor, the the women's section was on the third floor, was a mezzanine. They could see the imam give the khutbah perfectly. And everyone, it was a very welcoming, inviting mosque. But you'd have a few incidents here and there. I remember, they used to cook for during every Juma prayer. They used to cook like shawarma and falafel and everything. And before Juma prayer, it was next to a Catholic school, so even the Catholic kids would come into the mosque basement and buy food. It was actually pretty good dawah because they would come into the mosque, so it just became more familiar to them. But I remember one time this these two Muslim sisters, teenagers, they brought their non-Muslim friend who was not really dressed quite appropriately, but like some uncle was in the lobby of the mosque, and this uncle like almost physically kicked this like woman or this girl out of the mosque, like yelling and screaming at her like, "Get out of here, this is a masjid," like in front of everybody. And it was just awful. Like, yeah. So I tried to console them and just like, but I just know in my head that she's going to tell her friends and they're going to tell their parents. And then, there's just going to be a just big, just a major PR disaster. But go ahead, Sim.
I always wonder with those incidents, what exactly are they afraid of? I mean, they walk around in our society where they see that or worse on a daily basis. So it's not like this woman walking through the men's section is going to like impurify the musalla, right? And all of a sudden, like everybody's like not able to pray there. Like what?
Yeah, it's in their eyes.
I don't understand it.
In the mosque, like it's their turf. It's like we paid all this money for the mosque, and it's our only place where we can, have Sharia law. So I don't know, Sim. What you're going to say something?
Yeah, well, so in order to unpack this, we have to kind of dissect how the mosques are first established in most of our communities. Yes, there's going to be outliers, but let's just, with a broad brush, try to unpack. Most of these mosques are established by immigrant uncles who, they're religiously inclined and are probably and most likely using the template that they have from back home, from their original countries, in how they envision a mosque. And if anyone's been to the Muslim world, you hardly ever see a woman going to the mosque. I mean, there are women, but not. Uh, it's not the main consideration of any mosque. And so I think it's important to be consider what kind of mentality goes into some of these mosques that are established. It's not necessarily like a targeted um, attempt against women. I don't think people are against women, but they don't. It, where they were from, what they envision a mosque to be, is not what aligns with what is the acceptable basic human rights that should be afforded to a woman visiting a mosque to. And those things a lot of times are not in alignment, and we see what we're seeing today. And what your wife said, Sister Sarah said, was incredibly accurate. When you saw ISNA, they're going to be hip to the times. They're going to know what is actually the acceptable decorum, something that is more inclusive and affording women all every advantage that is possible, that can be afforded to them. And they have what I mentioned before Sister Star joined was, they have the resources, they have money, they have the ability to come up with that kind of uh, design and environment. It costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to a court. You don't see existing infrastructure with like elevated like pavilions where you can have a female congregation in the back. That's how a lot of the mosques are now being designed in wealthy areas. If you go into impoverished neighborhoods and Muslim communities that don't have the resources like that, you're not going to see that. And unfortunately, that's, I think, sometimes used as a way to show like, hey, look, the Muslims are backwards. Yeah, we definitely have some things that we need to work on. Absolutely, we have some issues, but it's not always a situation where it's a targeted instance against sisters.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what William and I were talking about on the break, right? Is that, men have the obligation to actually go to the masjid, at the very least in Jummah, right? And then should go to the masjid for the 5 daily prayers, whereas women are never required to actually go to the masjid, right? And so when building a masjid, that's the primary consideration, right? And but there's not those additional spaces in the West for women to have that third space, to have some space outside of home to congregate. And so the masjid becomes the de facto community center. And a lot of these designs work against kind of a cultural expectation for women to be able to have that place to go and to congregate and to be able to learn and teach each other and things of that nature.
I would also add to this that around the country, in Richmond, I've been to masajid where they have a balcony for the sisters. In Elmira, New York, I've seen a masjid that has a room for sisters with children. The question is always, what about the room for brothers with children? In what is it? Not Troy, maybe Albany proper. There's a masjid that has the small wooden barrier between the men's side and the women's side. These are all messages that were built, by immigrant communities, but still had the women in mind. Here in the inner city in Baltimore, a lot of times the masajid are built based on what we have. For example, again, going back to my own masjid, it's from row homes. It's 3 row homes put together. And we took one of those row homes, and one of the areas of that row home is for the women. It's for the women. And so even though we're working on limited resources, we do the best that we have with what we have, taking into account the cultural paradigm. And, this was alluded to, that it's about the mindset of the people who are putting this together. And again, coming from a Western perspective, the men and the women, it's organic that they work together in the community. This doesn't mean intermixing. I'm not talking about intermixing, but everybody has their role, and there's an organic in the community. And you mentioned this earlier. The fact is that these people anyway. We're with a lot of team members are interacting. It's odd.
I'm sorry, you broke up. You broke up on us, William. Did you want to try that again? Something wrong with your internet? Did you want to just say that again, or because we couldn't?
Alhamdulillah. How much did I break up?
Pretty much everything.
Allah Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Hold on, let me see what I can do. Let me drop off of this for a minute, inshallah.
No, you're fine now.
Mashallah. Yeah, because I'm gone. Allah. No, basically, so while I'm gone, inshallah, I'll just say that, what I was saying is that, it does in a lot of ways go back to the cultural paradigm. And the reality is that we, in this society, we interact. And to pretend that, to interact in the masjid is some kind of sacrilege or something like that, it's not just foreign. It goes against the organic human relationship. We respect gender roles, and we're not talking about intermixing or anything like that. We're talking about respect for the Sharia, of course, but in respecting the Sharia proper, there's still room for human interaction and representation and given space. And I don't know if it came through, but I mentioned like 3 or 4 different masjids that have these different models throughout the United States, both immigrant built as well as established by the indigenous community here. And most of the time when a masjid is built here in the West, it is going to take the women into consideration, because the women are in fact part of the community.
Yeah. No, good. Yeah.
In the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, women and men went to the same mosque. They had, when there was a khutbah and Friday prayers or whatnot, women would, even if the imam said something and the woman for whatever reason disagreed, she had a voice to actually say no. The story happened with Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab, when he was talking about the dowry, and he's like, we should put a limit. And then one sister said, well, the Prophet didn't. I mean, there was interaction back, like Islamically, it's sound. It's just when culture comes in that is misogynistic in a way, that's where it goes, that's where it gets mixed up with what people think now is Islam. And then that's problematic. So I believe just people need to educate themselves how it really was back in the day, and start implementing that instead of trying to figure out. It's already figured out.
If I may add, one more point, and that is, one of the last, in my opinion, the last great mujaddid of this ummah, Shaykh Uthman ibn Fadouye, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him. One of the sparks that really forced his hand to establish his Jamaat, and really we can say started the entire movement that became the Sokoto Empire, that became this entire Islamic empire that spanned all of West Africa, was started because the Shehu began teaching women in the masjid in a cultural setting where this was foreign to them, and Hausa land. And his argument was the women intermix with the men in the marketplace, they intermix with the men in the community, in the streets, and all these things. You don't have a problem. But when it comes to the masjid, you're saying that they can't come to the masjid. Now, I want to be very clear. He wasn't talking about intermixing like male, female, like this. The women had their section, the men had their section, but the women were afforded space to learn their deen, to come to and this learning of the deen is vital. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu was instructed not to keep his wife from going to the masjid to learn. And this is something that we have to understand, that there's precedent for all of this. And all I'm saying is that even in a cultural setting such as Hausaland, where it was a foreign concept, those people who strove to teach the deen still afforded women space. And at the end of the day, I think that's it's important for us. It's important for us to take that into consideration. And I'm not saying that we're not. I'm just giving voice to it. And I think that Sim brought up a good point. I don't think that anybody's sitting around plotting and planning, how can we keep women out of the masjid this time? I don't think anybody's doing that. But I think that it's a matter of, saying it vocally is important in this day and age. Wallahu a'lam.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I think sisters need to not get discouraged. Go to the mosque, show your presence, show you're valued. If you let that dissuade you, that just further entrenches them in their argument. Like, oh, sisters don't come to the mosque, so why do we have to build something? If you show up there and you demand something, you are part of the community, you are establishing committees or any kinds of activities that are related to the furthering of dawah or whatever is happening at your mosque, then like people are like, hey, we have to give proper accommodations. Maybe this isn't the right facility. Maybe we all have to pool our resources together and get a bigger and better place, something that can actually be something that's worthwhile and something that can be accommodating to everyone.
Yeah, I think
I agree with you. I agree 100%. What's been happening in Toronto, I know this person personally, the sister, she co-founded a masjid just for women. It's a virtual masjid, it's not an actual physical place. And they do actually khutbahs before the pandemic. They actually did have a space, and she would be the imam and do the khutbah and everything. I mean, there were mixed, opinions about that. It's just a lot of women felt no matter how hard they try to fit in regular masjids, they're not welcome. They're always shut down. And I've seen this firsthand and experienced it. And they're like, and a lot of women were like, okay, fine, we're going to start our own masjid. And whatever woman wants to come, they come. It's only for women, the masjid. So there's no men at all involved. And I personally have mixed feelings about that. I feel it's great because it's a safe space for women and talk, and not only just to talk about religious things, and also to meet up. And a lot of non-Muslim women came and joined the prayer. It's like it's, I don't know, it's just, I guess, another form of dawah, I guess, where it involves women. But I don't know, I still have mixed feelings. I don't know how truly I should feel about it.
If I can just say one thing about that, inshallah, what I would say is that I'm all for a women's only masjid, especially a virtual masjid. I think that that's really great. And I think that, women getting together in that kind of atmosphere, especially, again, virtual is wonderful. But for a woman to give the khutbah and lead the prayer in that way as Jummah, like normal Jummah, this isn't permissible. It's not permissible in any of the madhahib that I'm aware of. And so this is something that should be left off. She can give a talk. She can give a bayan. She can give durus, read. She can even lead in dua, teach dua for that matter. Lead in prayers, supplications and the like. But to have and let's add to that, to have a virtual masjid where they're performing salat together, it has no basis. It wouldn't be permitted at all. And so these activities should be left off. They should be left off. But there's definitely uses for such a platform. The platform is good. It's a good idea. But to have a virtual salat or Jummah, they should abandon that idea.
Oh, they don't.
Wallahu a'lam.
They definitely do not do a virtual prayer, congregation kind of prayer. But they do Jummah, and that's what I felt kind of mixed, because I wasn't too sure if it's, if that's permissible. But as you said, yeah, it's not, and that's where I kind of found it iffy, because at the same time, women are not. It's not. Women don't have to pray Jummah. They can just pray together normally. And that's why I was like, is that really necessary for women to pray Jummah together? They don't have to. It's not like men, like they have to. So that's another reason I'm like, why are they even doing that?
If
I
they
don't
give
have
a bayan and pray Dhuhr together, then
So I was thinking,
there might be an
exactly.
issue with that, right?
Exactly. That's what I don't understand. Why do they believe that they have to pray Jummah together?
I think that you brought up the most interesting point, and I think that you struck the nail on the head, and that is that they feel pushed away, and so now they're trying to it's a reaction. It's a reactionary stance that they don't feel like they're being made part of a community that's already existent. They don't feel as though they're invited or welcome. So they're creating something for themselves the best way they know how, which isn't correct. But so I think that this is a reaction to something that they're experiencing.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other comments before we move on to the next topic? I didn't say that ironically. I mean,
I actually do have. May Allah guide us all and help us all, and may Allah unite us all. And yeah, that's my only comment about that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I just want to always mention to whenever we come across these type of topics, and is that don't fall into the Western debates surrounding this stuff where it becomes men versus women, women versus men. It's about our religion, teaches us to not look at things in that way, in the categorical way that a lot of the discussion has evolved online and in the social media space. Think of it as, how can we help our fellow Muslims, whether they're man or woman, get closer to their creator? And that's as simple as we have to think about it.
yeah.
No, I agree. No, I definitely do not look at it as man versus woman, but some people feel like, some women feel that's how it is. Not necessarily it is true, but some men, I've seen men also going with that men against women. I'm like, why can't we just unite? We're from the same family.
Right.
Why can't you unite?
Absolutely. And I think if we control ourselves, and we whether we're a man or a woman, we don't create that division. We have to be the better person, even though somebody might be going that direction. You say, hey, I'm a Muslim, I want to get closer to God, and why are you trying to stop me? And that's as simple as you need to take it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with Islam for Europeans in another sense, in that we're not trying to make this an exclusivist group. It's it's more about that Muslims from European background, just in a totally different paradigm, socially, in the West. But that doesn't mean that that at the end of the day, the Ummah is one, and that we should all have in mind that we're all working together to get closer to our Creator. So, as we move along with this initiative, we want to collaborate with as many Muslims as possible to achieve those aims. And there's also other issues that that born Muslims are going through that we don't really go through, and that instead of trying to have this antagonistic relationship, or to go back and forth with all this cancel culture, just acknowledge that there's both issues that need to be addressed. There's many aspects in which our struggles are the same, but that doesn't mean that we can't collaborate together, to help each other with issues that may be different. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
I mean, can I just say something about that? I mean, some born Muslim, me being a born Muslim, have experiences, and I don't know how rare my situation was growing up. My dad, even though he is Muslim, he is or was raised as Muslim, he is an Islamophobe. He used to like abuse me, like, which is so odd. Non-Muslims don't hear of these stories where as a born Muslim, I was actually physically and mentally abused because I decided to put the hijab at the age of, how old was I? 13, 12, 13, something like that. I'm like, and yeah, and not a lot of people know that some born Muslims do relate with converts, but we don't have that voice.
That's so common what you experience, by the way. So I mean,
Oh,
in
is
terms,
it?
yeah, with a lot of, at least in the Pakistani community, there's a lot of people who are secular, and they even though they call themselves Muslims, if their
Yeah.
daughter wears the hijab, they're like, what is wrong with you? Like, are you out of your mind? In Turks, that
Yeah.
happens as well. So yeah, it is something that is a huge struggle that overlaps with the struggle that many converts experience.
If I
Exactly.
can, one of the things is that, and again, we were ending this on a unification thing, but I'm going to add a little bit of divisiveness and say that we find this in the immigrant community a lot of times, right? This is what's found in the immigrant community. But if we go to a land such as Syria, Damascus itself, if you go to Abu Nur, then there between Asr and Maghrib, there is a period where the entire masjid that for Jummah, it's over 6,000 people goes to Jummah there. It's only women, and the doors are locked for men. Men are not permitted into the masjid at this time. In West Africa, you have the Yantaru movement, which is women only scholarship, where the women are going to women to learn, and that's what the women are doing in the Jamiat Abu Nur at the time. Is that women are teaching and spiritually guiding other women. And the Yantara movement in West Africa is very similar to this. The Tijaniya also has a rich culture of women scholars teaching the women, and so there's a rich tradition of women taking on these leadership roles and being honored for that in the Muslim world. I think that when we find the immigrant communities coming here, uh, they don't have that part of their culture or that aspect when they come. And we can use harsher language, but we won't uh, regarding those who come to these lands. So the experience of those immigrants who come to my own daughter, she's niqabi actually, and when she asked me to wear niqab, she was around that same age, about 13 or so, and she did it because she was influenced by my wife and other than them. And she when she asked me if she could wear niqab, I told her I'd allow her to wear niqab if she could write me a paper explaining why she wanted to wear niqab. So I put it on her. It was her choice, but she also had to explain to me the reason that she wanted to do it. It's not that I was telling her not to. In fact, I would encourage it. But the reality is, I needed it to be her choice, and I needed her to understand why she's making that choice. I think that with the convert community, this is what you'll find more than anything is the encouragement for our women to cover. While the immigrant community, there's a stigma where they're trying to adopt or adapt into the Western society, and they fear for their daughters. And I could be right, I could be wrong. This is my own seeing, my own experience.
Sim, would you say it's a fear factor? Is that the main reason why, or?
It could definitely be a fear factor. I don't have enough experience in that to comment more, but
When it comes to my dad personally, I just want to make it clear, my dad and I are absolutely wonderful together. Their relationship is beautiful. I love it. And but with my dad growing up, it was not fear because this did not happen in the West. It happened in the Middle East, where I grew up in United Arab Emirates, which is like Muslims. But with him, truly, with him, it was pure prejudice. He honestly thought being hijabi is like one of the worst things you could do as a human being, because it's backward. That's what he used to say all the time. It's backwards. We want to move forward in life, and we're going. I guess it's from now that I think about it, it seems that it was insecurity, that he's afraid that people might judge him, like, oh my God, you come from a religious background, ew. That's what he was like thinking, I guess.
Yeah, well, in the Arab societies from in the 70s and 60s and 70s, many of the elite of the most wealthy people, they were people who completely abandoned Islam. They were very secular. They were part of the nationalist movement, the Ba'ath parties in the Arab world, and they had like Western style parties where alcohol was flowing, free mixing, not a semblance of Islam in them.
Nope.
I mean, Islam was just like, and not that they denounced Islam, but it was just something that was on the periphery or something. It's not even in their mind. But what happens is that when you are being raised as a child in that environment, you're seeing religion and religious people as backward people, and the society is moving forward. And the more Western we are, the more closer we are to success and growth and the overall prosperity of not just my family but the country, because the Arab world has experienced at least what they've seen from the Europeans is that, hey, when they abandoned their religion, they experienced success. And I think the Arab world also, and then the Muslim world in general, experienced the same thing.
Yeah, as an anecdotal kind of story, my wife is Malaysian, and she was talking about with our child who's coming that she wanted to give him a modern name, meaning like an English Western name, because that's something that's kind of in vogue in Malaysia now, is that they'll take, they give two names, like a first name and a middle name that are kind of one name, and then one of those will be like a Western name. And I was opposed to it, and I actually had to convince her to not do so, because I was like, we're in a society where you're identified by your name, and if you give the child a Western name, then it's more easy for them to assimilate into the broader culture that's here and lose the Muslim identity altogether. And so by giving them a more traditional Muslim name, it kind of forces them to keep that identity and keep that religion as a central part of who they are.
I guess that's
true. But then there's, sorry, Rob, to interrupt, but there's also another point of view with that, is that a lot of like non-Muslims might think, oh, Muslim, you have to change your name and everything, and then you like let go of your culture altogether. But then if they can realize they can keep their Western name or have children with Western names, it will become more inclusive, as long as the name does not go against Islamic ethics. There's also that. So in my opinion, if Rob and I have kids, for example, I told him I want them to have both our names, my last name and his last name, so they can be attached to both cultures. And the first name, it doesn't matter. I personally don't care. I mean, a name to me is just a name.
Yeah, I guess I guess this is a topic for another episode, but my 2 cents is that, I guess my question is, at what point does a name become an Islamic name? Because you have names, in the Muslim world that were not even names of the Sahaba. It's just that people now associate it with Islam because that country is now Muslim, and there are millions of people with those names to begin with. So
True.
Is there a certificate we have to get? Is it like Zabiha certificate, where this is now officially a Muslim name? Do we have to apply? Do we have to reapply? What's the do you have to reach 10,000 signatures? I mean, at what point is Robert an Islamic name? That's what I want to know.
This is a huge pet peeve of mine, so I'll do my best to stay silent on this.
Okay, all right. I guess we'll move on to the next topic then. Jordan Peterson, who is big in huge Western figure, creates a lot of controversy, I guess, within Muslim circles as well, because especially in 2017, he said he wanted to reach out to, well, I guess, quote unquote, Muslim moderates, but at least he wanted to entertain the conversation talking with Muslim intellectuals, which got varied reactions. You have some Muslims who are saying, we definitely should try to get something going. Others saying, there's an agenda behind what he says. And on top of that, the people that he associates with are very anti-Islam. Case in point, skip ahead to 2020. And he commented on the known ex-Muslim Ayah Hirsi Ali's tweet status. And this is generating a lot of discussion. I'll just read first from Ayah Hirsi. And again, this is not an endorsement of Ayah Hirsi Ali as well. We know, the lies that she's been telling about Islam and the admitted lies that she's had in her own personal story. But nonetheless, this is getting like thousands and thousands of likes on Twitter. So it's inevitable. I mean, Muslims are thrust into these, these discussions by default, just because this is what's been going on, in the social media world. So just read what she said, and then Jordan Peterson's reaction, and then I want to get your guys' reaction as well. So Ayah Hirsi Ali in his book says, this raises a fundamental question, and this is regarding violence towards women in Europe. Why does this book focus only on Muslim men and not all men, when sexual violence and contempt for women are universal phenomena? After all, when the Red Army invaded Germany between 44 and 45, Soviet soldiers committed many more crimes than those described in her book. In this book, raping countless German women in a semi-organized campaign of retaliation. In the Bosnian War of the 1990s, it was Muslim women who suffered at the hands of Serbian paramilitary rapists. Men who have recently arrived in Europe, North America, and Australia from Cuba, Argentina, Serbia, and South Sudan, just to name 4 countries with very small Muslim populations, have been guilty of sexual misconduct of all kinds. The leading sex trafficking rings in the world today are led by non-Muslim criminal gangs in various parts of Asia, Russia, and Central and South America. Moreover, it would seem that the consumers of the most sordid products of the sex industry, notably child pornography, are mainly from the West. If several million, mostly young men, had arrived in Europe from any part of the world, there would almost certainly have been an increase in sexual crimes against women. In this book, nevertheless, I focus on Muslim men's attitudes and behavior for 3 reasons. 1, the scale of the migration from Muslim-majority countries to Europe, as well as its likely continuation and the associated growth of Europe's Muslim population. 2, its political salience. Put simply, the evidence of sexual misconduct by some Muslim immigrants provides populist and other right-wing groups and parties with a powerful tool to demonize all Muslim immigrants. If we bring this issue out of the taboo zone, discussion will cease to be monopolized by those elements. 3, frank discussion also challenges the Islamists, who recognize the problem but propose a remedy that would set back all women. I am well aware of the difficulties of this undertaking. Talking about violence by Muslim men against European women is unfashionable in an age of identity politics, where we are supposed to operate within a partly historical matrix of victimhood. It is even harder when the topic is a favorite of Russian agents of disinformation as well as alt-right trolls. Russian President Vladimir Putin's government is engaged in a campaign intended to destabilize liberal democracy in Europe as well as the United States. Directly or indirectly through credulous or malicious Western websites, the Russians spread fake news. For example, the claim that the perpetrators in the case of a gang rape in Spain were Arabs when in fact they were Cuban, Argentinian, and Spanish. Even without the Russians, extreme right-wing groups are highly effective in exaggerating or wholly fabricating anti-immigrant stories. Anyone who seeks to write in a serious fashion about negative aspects of immigration is almost certain to be accused of legitimizing the alt-right and its accomplices. Yet I'm convinced that a book such as this can provide far more effective arguments against those people than a strategy of denial, which would seem to be the alternative preferred by many liberals and progressives. Only by clarifying what has gone wrong in Europe in recent years can one make a truly credible case for effective integration of immigrants. For that, not the exclusion and repatriation favored by the populace of the right is the only feasible way forward. And Jordan Peterson responded by saying, I read Hirsi Ali's book. She is trying in good faith to think through a very complex set of issues, but thinking in good faith is no longer tolerated if the conclusions generated or even the questions asked are not in keeping with whatever is today's most tolerant orthodoxy. So my question to the panel would be, is there a point in saying, we should take the roots of many Muslims who say we should not even entertain these discussions because Ayah Hirsi Ali is a noted liar when it comes to Islam? Or should we just face it head on and realize that this is just part of the normal discourse? And I'll give it to Sim first. Go ahead.
Well, first, I mean, there's a lot to unpack from
There
what
is.
Ayah Hirsi Ali's commentary was. She gave all these like qualifiers related to the Bosnian War and how women were the victims of rape, and from the European side, from what we consider the civilized world, they were the actual antagonists in a lot of these matters. And so there was a level of fairness indicated, at least from the onset, right? And I think when you look at the entirety of the issue, it's incredibly complex. And I think Jordan Peterson did say what it is, and he said that it's a very complex discussion, and if you are going to have a discussion like this, it's not something that you're going to win a lot of friends with. You're not. It's something that can definitely it's not something that's in vogue. It's something that you can easily be associated with far right nationalists, and I think if those authors and people like Ayaan Hirsi Ali showed their discontent for that crowd more, because when you see those people commenting underneath her videos, you see pure hatred. Even though she may not be displaying that level of hatred, and she may be, for all intents and purposes, let's say she's 100% objective, and she has no discontent for Islam. She's got no personal vendetta, even though from her backstory we know about her, her genital mutilation story that is well known. She has plenty of reasons to have gripes with Islam and Muslims or Muslim culture or whatever. Let's just put aside all that, and she's purely coming from an objective state. She has a responsibility to her audience and dissuade them to say that, hey, look, I'm not here against Muslims or I'm not here against the expulsion or the same objectives that you nationalists have, you far right nationalists have. And I'm kind of distancing, making what we call but we're distancing myself from what you're all about. Like that's not in my discussion. So I don't. There's just so much more to discuss with, at least with them, in this regard, because Jordan Peterson's statement was just very small in that regard. Yeah, of course it's complex.
Yeah, no, I mean, there wasn't really much that he said. I mean, I think it's more the people he's associating with, because at the very least, among that crowd, Jordan was at least willing to have a discussion with other Muslims, which was huge. I mean, it's such a taboo subject that a lot of people that associate with will never have any discussion at all with Muslims. And he was actually invited to come to Reviving the Islamic Spirit years ago, but
Yeah.
it was canceled, unfortunately, which is a shame.
It was canceled because of social justice Muslims who didn't want him to have the stage, and he didn't have any. They literally had nothing on him, and that's the funniest thing, that the people who in our community who are against him they're just following the cues from whatever their liberal friends are telling them. Like, hey, he's a white supremacist. Like, okay, well, where did he say he's a white supremacist? By what evidences are you bringing up this allegation? Because I've seen so many of his lectures, and I haven't seen any indication of that.
Yeah. You guys have anything else to add?
Mashallah, what I would say, it is a lot to unpack. And I think that the way that she qualified it in the beginning was very thorough. What she said was actually good, without having read the book, because it seems like she gave all of those qualifiers and then went ahead to bring all the stats regarding the immigrants. But I think that the ultimate question is this a discourse that we need to have? And the reality is that this is a matter of immigration. It's not a matter of Islam. And so when we talk about sexual abuse or sex trafficking, human trafficking, all of these things, then we talk about it from an Islamic perspective, not a modern political what's going on today perspective. When I say that, I mean, if we want to talk about that, we can talk about that. And it seems as though this is what she's talking about, is the immigration issue and how it's used by the conservative parties of different nations in the West to attack Islam. But our discussion doesn't have to be their discussion. Our discussion is different than their discussion. They're discussing it from should we let these people into our country? Our discussion is that what should be done when these things are found. What is it permitted? Is it acceptable? Is this something that we should keep quiet? All of these things come into our discussion, which is it's a different conversation. And so my own opinion, because I don't, especially with European immigration, we could say laws, and I'm not trying to be brass, but crass, whatever. I'm not trying to be crass, but it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me ultimately. And I have my own perspectives on these things. And at the end of the day, it doesn't have anything to do with me. I don't have anything to do with that. And so I'm not part of that conversation. But I am part of the conversation of saying that we need to enjoin the good, forbid the evil, stand out for justice wherever we find it, even if it's against ourselves. And so if we find Muslims doing these horrendous acts, then we say, hey, these are horrendous acts and they need to be brought to justice. Right. So that's our conversation. Our conversation is different. And that's my own perspective on the matter. Wallahu a'lam.
So,
This is
Sheikh Yarnis, the counter to that would be that a lot of people would say that no, it doesn't affect you, brother, because you are a Muslim and your concern should be for your Muslim brethren in Europe. And if it affects them, these immigration laws are affecting them and their families and their ability to bring other family members to their respective countries. You should empathize and you should side with them and you should
I disagree
advocate.
with that. And I disagree with that completely. And like I said, I have my own views. Who said that they should be allowed to bring their family? Who said that they should be able to come to a country, especially if the people of that country don't want them? Who said that there has to be open borders and people should be allowed in this way? So this conversation about immigration, again, this is a conversation about immigration and the immigration laws. And me personally, I believe that why should the Muslims just say migrate to Sweden or Norway or something like that when we have wonderful Islamic countries that they could go to, but they don't want to go to the Muslim countries because they want that prestige of the West. They want the dunya. And again, this is, I don't want to be too harsh, but they're seeking dunya. There many times these people are, and again, this
I
is
know,
the
again,
problem with
brother,
no.
like
I want to
people,
say that this is the problem with soundbite things, because the
yeah,
fact is that this is a huge discussion. What about the Islamic countries where they're being oppressed? I know a Nigerian brother who he grew up in Nigeria, Muslim country, Muslim area, Muslim family, but he didn't learn Islam till he came to Baltimore. So there are these stories and there are these anecdotes and things like that. But at the end of the day, I'm saying, who said that this is not an Islamic discussion? This is not an Islamic discussion unless we're talking
no,
about
people
the
can say
role of
it
immigration.
is an Islamic discussion where they can say that for hundreds of years Islam was ruled by open borders, And
Actually, for 1400 years, the ruling was that if
Yeah.
a person migrated, it was forbidden. It was forbidden, clearly forbidden, to move from the lands that were the majority was Muslim to the lands where the leadership was non-Muslim. And if a person did that, they were considered a mudajjin or a mudajjir. They was either considered someone humiliated or a domesticated animal, a domesticated pet. This was the fiqh labels given to them. And so this phenomena of Muslims migrating and setting up residence amongst non-Muslim lands, this is some, and I'm not talking about the people who were born and raised in these lands, because that has a different ruling. I'm talking about immigration. And so the fiqh for 1400 years has always been open borders amongst the Muslim lands, but trying to impose ourselves into non-Muslim lands, this can very easily be an argument for colonization. It can be. And I'm not saying I'm for or against that colonization. I'm simply saying that the argument stands. The argument is a legitimate argument.
Can I just, I want to add something when it comes to why these refugees didn't go to other Arab countries. Me as a Syrian and knowing a lot of Syrian refugees, they weren't welcome in the Arab world.
But they were welcome in Turkey.
For a while. But then
I actually know, entire areas in Turkey that are Syrian refugee areas.
Yeah.
And so they're obviously, refugee status is something different. And this is important too, because there's a huge difference between refugee and immigrant. There's a huge difference between the two.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're saying refugees has a different, in your opinion, refugees is a total different story than immigration. Yeah.
In the Sharia, because now we're talking about somebody who is in need of safe haven, as opposed to somebody who's doing this because they want to progress their status in this life.
I understand now. Yeah.
So we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes. I just want to add that, again, this is a very sensitive topic. I think for, if we go back as to why this is happening, like we have the neoliberal wars of the early 2000s, we have this propping up of puppet dictatorships, and this has been all propped up by the governments in the West, not the people, but the governments who have destabilized these countries, which has caused this massive shift. The way I look at it is, and like William said, they see this and they think that this is what Islam promotes, and I think that's where we have to that should be our way of addressing this, and that we should first and foremost let people know or inform people and educate people that what does Islam say about these things, because there's a lot of ignorance out there about Islam, and a lot of people think that Islam condones these things, and it's such a huge zeitgeist of misinformation that gets formulated in so many books. And I know it seems hopeless to be able to counter that. Thomas Sowell once said, some things are believed because they're demonstrably true, but many other things are believed just because they have been asserted repeatedly. And I think that's what's happening with this misinformation about Islam. A lot of people think that, it's in Islam, it's completely okay to, assault non-Muslim women. They think it's completely okay to enslave them. They think it's completely okay to, start these grooming gangs. And we all know, you can go to any Muslim with any modicum of education, they will tell you that's completely false. But in their minds, no one is saying these things because we don't have the loudspeaker that people like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris and Ayah Hirsi Ali and Yasmin Muhammad, that they all have. We're just stuck with our little, I don't want to call them, stuck for the law. I don't want to say they're little. Mashallah, like Ma'am Luke says, like, you guys are moving up there in subscribership, and may Allah continue to increase that. But again, it just seems hopeless sometimes that we're going to be able to, give our side of the story. And again, it's loaded too, because, even in, like you said, even engaging in this discussions, a lot of Muslims will think, oh, now you're taking their side. And no, we have to be clear. We're not taking their side. We are saying that, look, these are complicated issues.
We have to look in the mirror. We have to look in the mirror at the good and the bad. And we have to take everything. We have to, in order for us to change, we have to be honest with ourselves. And
correct.
And change can only happen when you are truthfully examining all the issues and objectively wanting to change, and you truly want to be a better society, a better part of whatever country you are part of, and I think that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't be afraid of these kinds of conversations, that she's bringing up with the books, right? Like, uh, we should be firm on the truth. These people are criminals, according to our own code of conduct. And so why should we be afraid to point out the fact that these people are criminals and they deserve criminal punishment? And the more we try to hide from that, the more it just reinforces those stereotypes.
I can completely understand why many Muslims, especially born Muslims, would not want to engage in these conversations. That's completely their right. They feel like they're being that they're under attack. Like there's this huge campaign against Islam. They feel threatened being a visible minority Muslim, whenever they walk down the street. So I can understand why they wouldn't want to engage in these conversations. But I think for us, I mean, the paradigm is different in that, these are our aunts and uncles, these are our mothers and fathers, these are the people we played tennis with, this is our entire community, and it's our obligation to engage and dispel those misconceptions so that
If I can, I just, again, when I say I disagree with you, I want to be very clear with my disagreement, right? So I don't think that it's an obligation upon us, and that's my disagreement. Is that there are people who this is their role, this is what they do. They talk about politics, they talk about the criminal justice system, they talk about these things. We have a huge problem in Baltimore. We have Muslim drug dealers. I'm sure it's not unique to Baltimore. We have Muslims who enter Islam because that's the Muslim drug dealers got the best plug. We have this situation. Does that mean that Islam promotes this? Of course not. But it's not for every single Muslim to get out there and say Muslims are against drug dealers. No, the people who that's their role, they do that. The people who do this, they do that. Everybody has their own role. And, we have to honor that. And so it's not just that the uncles or the aunts, or whether they be immigrant or indigenous Muslim, is not just that they're shied away from it or anything like that. It's just not their role. It's not their field. And so we have to honor that and say that the discussion's not for everyone. They're not, if we're talking about, if somebody asks you directly, what does Islam say about this? Then we should all be able to answer that. But if somebody comes and says, what do you think about immigration? Well, that's a personal discussion. That's a personal discussion, and a person can choose to engage in it or not engage in it. And I don't think that anyone is under an obligation to defend the criminal behavior of immigrants, be they Muslim or non-Muslim, or sweep it under the rug or reveal it or any, hey man, it's a crime, it's bad, like everybody said, we're honest about it. But I don't think that people need to engage in the conversation unless that's their field.
Yeah, true. Does anyone else have any other comments before we wrap up?
Actually, I want to add to what Brother William said. I totally agree with him on that, because when it comes to, like, everybody has a different role. I agree. Some people might be like humanizing Muslims by just living their life, being the best that they can be. That's their role. That's what they're capable of. And then there are some people who want to make a bigger impact, reach more people and all that. And there's that, and there's many different roles. I think Muslims should have the choice to choose what role they want to, go for, because I'm only going to speak with my own experience as a hijabi. I just feel I'm being forced to speak for all Muslim women about Muslim women rights and all that. Just because I'm walking down the street with a hijab on, people expect me to have all the answers. And I had people come up to me, ask me weird questions, and I don't want to be in that role. Everything has become politicized. Oh, I can't pronounce the word, sorry.
Close enough.
And it's getting, and honestly, and I think it's ridiculous. I think we like this comes from both Muslims and non-Muslims. I feel like if we just respect, learn how to disagree, so people can actually choose the roles they want to choose and make a better impact, because it's so like the situation with Muslims in the West in general, whether convert or born Muslims or immigrants or refugees or whatnot, is that there's so many differences that we don't know how to deal as Muslims. We don't know how to deal with these differences, and therefore we're always in a conflict. And I think that's what's going on. And then with all these situations with the, you know, the right, we can't hide behind like, oh, Islam, we can't show Islam. It's not Islam, it's Muslims that are doing these bad things.
Absolutely.
And we need to learn, as Muslims, we need to learn how to disagree, because nobody's actually listening. Nobody's having a discussion. It's all about yelling, who's louder. And that's the one thing I believe we need to work on as a community, as people, ourselves.
Well said. Well said. Well said. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. No. Okay. If anyone else doesn't have any other comments, I think we'll wrap it up. Yusuf, William, Sim. No, I think we're good. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on our panel today, everybody. MashaAllah. You know, like may Allah put barakah in this discussion. And it was definitely, you know, something that, you know, that needed to happen, and hopefully it'll generate more discussion, everything. Okay. William, do you want to finish up with like a dua for everybody?
اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا. آمين.
آمين. آمين.
Ameen.
Ameen.
Short and sweet. Okay. I'm your host, Robert from Islam for Europeans. Thank you to my guests, Yusuf, Sim from the Mad Mamluks, my wife, Sarah, and William. And be sure to buy his book, Message to the White Man in America. And I believe you have your own podcast going on, coming up soon too, William, or is that true or not?
Inshallah, I'm thinking about it. I'm working on it. We'll see what happens from it. Inshallah.
Keep us posted. All right. Subscribe to Islam for Europeans, everybody. I'm your host, Robert. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
wa rahmatullah.